Elizabeth Rosenberg believes the future of leadership belongs to those who trust their authentic story, their purpose, and their intuition. Companies turn to her for unfiltered good advice, and leaders seek her out when they are ready to grow. Elizabeth is a serial entrepreneur and visionary who drives authentic change through her work. She's the founder of the Good Advice Company, a marketing and communications consultancy specializing in C-suite personal branding. I need to specialize in how to speak. Specializing in C-suite personal branding, thought leadership, and PR strategy. She's also the founder and chief spiritual officer. We'll get into what that means. A leadership development platform that helps executives cultivate intuitive intelligence as a competitive advantage in an AI-driven world, enabling leaders to develop uniquely human capabilities and make more grounded, purposeful decisions. I definitely need some speech coaching after that intro. We're going to talk about leadership. It's a lot. We're going to talk about leadership, intuition, branding. We're going to see where it goes, a whole bunch of stuff. Elizabeth, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited for this conversation.
And you know where I'm going with the first question. Elizabeth, from all of your experience, what do you believe is the most important characteristic of a great leadership team?
Thank you for giving me the heads up on this. And I can't wait to hear what everyone else has to say too. I believe it's accountability. I think it's holding each other accountable, not only for the decisions that are made, but the kind of like empathy that is also curated and cultivated within a culture and environment.
So important, because from so many CEOs, the biggest challenge I hear is, what do I need to do to hold people accountable? Do I just need to fire everybody? And a big part of it is because they don't even know how to define that word. And so how do you, when you say accountability, how do you define it?
I think as a leader, we have to make very tough decisions. So I also think we need to walk the walk. When we say we're going to do something, we actually have to do it. But a lot of the time, those decisions are very hard, especially in the world that we're living in right now. We have to make some very tough decisions that are going to affect the livelihood of others. I have a real problem when leadership call companies and the employees within their companies family, because we don't pay our family to hang around. We don't take you know what I mean? Like, we don't give our family time. It's not family to me. It is work. But I think it's really important for leadership teams, as you're working as a cohesive group, to hold yourselves accountable to the decisions that are made, but also just to be the kind of leader that you all have set out to be when it comes to the mission of the company and the values that you're trying to, I think, create within the culture.
Elizabeth, you call intuition a competitive advantage. Dig into a lot of that deeper, especially for the CEOs, leaders listening that are more data-driven, and intuition just sounds like soft skills crap. What does that mean, intuition as a competitive advantage?
I think intuition is one of those things that's become very woo-woo, which to me is crazy, because intuition, I think, is also that thing that's keeping us alive. It is that thing that we have evolved with from the beginning of time. I mean, without intuition, we would just stand there and let a predator take us instead of actually moving into fight or flight, right? You're intuitively like, I don't know if I should be going into that cave where that bear is or not. I think as leaders, we have really started to not listen to our intuition, and we are leaning so heavily into data that innately we feel like something is wrong, or innately we feel like we're not making a decision that's best for the business or best for the culture or best for the employees. And we are talked out of it through data. Now, I think we need to find a happy medium between the two. The thing that AI has done, I mean, I am a AI fan. It's one of those things, like when people are like, I just leave me behind when it comes to AI. That's like saying with electricity, like everyone on your block is going to have electricity and I still want to have candles. Or I'm going to write letters while everybody else is using email. It is happening with or without us. When it comes to AI, what's happening is we are then taking all of the answers that we are getting from AI as fact, instead of intuitively thinking about what that means. And we are all moving so fast that we are accepting that as the final answer. So for me, intuition is just, I think it is the skill that like we ignore the most and is the thing we need to listen to most.
Yeah, that's so important. I hear, and I'm also, I was joking with my wife yesterday. I'm not handy around the house at all. So I'm not the kind of guy that has a hobby. I don't have the wood shop in the garage. I'm not working on my car. But late in life, my hobby has become I go down to my office and I vibe code and I'm creating all this stuff. So I am an incredible fan of AI and what it can do, and I use it all the
Yeah.
time. But to your point, too often when leaders need to make the decision today, I hear, well, I asked Claude or I asked ChatGPT, and it's like, that's all good. Use that maybe to help you confirm an idea you have or extend it. But I think to your point, too many of us are relying on that and saying, let me go get the answer there. And then once I get the answer, I'm going to assume it's right versus treating it like an employee and saying, I got to check their work too.
Go to LinkedIn. I mean, LinkedIn is the perfect example of people who are using AI as their thought, I think their thought leadership engine versus partner. So I actually think LinkedIn is a perfect place so you can see who's using AI and who's not, and who's using it the right way and who's using it the wrong way. Because everything has become so templatized because AI was obviously trained on us, right? It's like, here's the problem, here's the solution, here's the 3-sentence structure. But now everyone is just dropping in, write a post about this, and then is posting that as if it's their thought leadership. So I even have on my LinkedIn profile, like all posts are written by me. And I have used Claude. I prefer Claude as a writing partner. I just think it understands my voice better. But even when I upload something and say, like, write a post on this, it is awful. It does not sound like me at all. It sounds like AI wrote it. So yeah, I just think there are ways that we need to learn how to use AI as a creative collaborator versus just the end all be all of an answer.
Elizabeth, what is a chief spiritual officer?
It is not religious. So let's start there. I know. I am also an intuitive medium. If you go on my LinkedIn, you're going to know this. I don't hide this anymore. As we were talking about intuition, it was one of those things that came up in every one of my reviews. Even as a child, like in elementary school, it was like, she's a very intuitive child. So I always thought,
does that mean does that mean we could talk to dead people on the podcast?
No, not right now, but yes.
Not now?
All right. No. We could talk about, we'll get into it, but it is part of my kind of proprietary process with my clients. I get to know them better than they know themselves, which truly is, I can't believe I get to do this as a job. It is so fun. But let's get back to what a CSO is. McKinsey has actually even done studies on the importance of spiritual health. And spiritual health is that thing that drives purpose. It is that thing that makes us want to get up in the morning. It's that thing that is our legacy that we leave behind. So when I think about a chief spiritual officer, to me, it is permission to lean into those things that allow you to find whatever that spiritual health is that's going to make you the best leader possible. For some, it's meditation. For some, it's tarot. For some, it is surfing. For some, it's cooking. So I just think that we have gotten there's so much stigma around what can actually calm our minds and really allow us to lean into that intuition. I just blew it all up and was like, let's go. Let's start thinking about ourselves as a chief spiritual officer. Let's destigmatize what spiritual health actually means in corporate America. And let's find the other people that are like us that are actually going to innovate and lean into that intuitive intelligence as we're building what the next, I think, world is going to look like.
And are you, I wonder how literal to take that. Are you suggesting that within an organization, there might be a chief spiritual officer, or is it all of our jobs to become our own chief spiritual officers? How should we be thinking about that?
I mean, some companies already have them. Now, how it's defined, I think, is not necessarily defined how I would define it. I believe it is something that we all need to lean into and we all need to, I think, figure out. So when I talk about also, again, spiritual health, we right now as a society focus on mental, emotional, physical, and oh my God, I'm blanking now. We focus on all the emotional health as well, right? And we don't think about the spiritual health. We don't think about what it is that is, I think, grounding us in everything. And I think the beauty of all of that too is that's all brought together with community. And I've also noticed that we're coming together as a community so much more in corporate America. I think with getting back into the office, I think with like doing experiential events and getting back out there, I think we're connecting on a larger level. But when it comes to that role, I think that's an independent role for yourself because I think it's going to be different for everyone.
Yeah, and I just think about the CEOs I work with, and I
Yeah.
think there are some that would just go, oh my God, what a great idea. And others that would, the 60-year-old guys like me look at that. By the way, I'm not this way. In fact, just last weekend, my wife, who's a health coach, did a full kind of VIP health day, and half the whole day was an energy healer that was there. So I can get into that, what some people would say is woo-woo kind of stuff. But I think there are a lot of people who would look at that and go, what are you talking about? That's got nothing to do with business. We've got to do business. But if you're not taking care of yourself, then you can't take care of business.
No, and as a leader, what I would say to you, if it's something you're not into, is it's not going to hurt. What is this hurting? And especially there's going to be people within your company that are into it. So acceptance of what that looks like is going to be your number one job as a leader. They are not doing anything, especially a Gen Z generation is very into astrology. They're very into numerology and what their zodiac signs mean and how they work together. They're very into behavioral analytics. They're very into boundaries and creating a personal space around that. We as leaders need to understand how to work with what that means for them, and then also how to help them show up as the best leader of themselves. So it's a managerial thing as well. I'm never going to tell somebody if they're showing up in a room with a tarot deck, how are you distracting everybody? Maybe that is the icebreaker that is then driving everybody to actually think more innovatively and differently, right? But I also think that as an intuitive medium, there's a lot of spiritual grifters out in the world right now. I mean, there's a gazillion documentaries that are fascinating. So I am that person that is always kind of doing that dance between the corporate world and the spiritual world. I have almost 30 years of experience working in corporate America. I've worked for some of the biggest brands in the world. You gotta know when to walk into a room and be like, all right, you guys, we're gonna talk about energy healing and zodiac signs, or you have to walk into a room and talk about earnings calls and operational structure. So I just think there has to be a happy medium between the two, because once you go too far into that spiritual world, you lost corporate America completely.
So let's shift gears a little bit from intuition, chief spiritual officer, and talk a little bit about branding, which is such a big part of what you do. And I want to spend some time digging into it. You work on C-suite personal branding. What does that mean, right? Because and I've had folks on the podcast before that have talked about personal branding, but what's your view when we talk about C-suite personal branding? How is that different, or is that different than company branding?
Oh, it's 100% different. I think that they work hand in hand together. There's a reason if you are at a company or you're an entrepreneur within that company that your brand is going to ladder up to the company's brand or vice versa. But your personal brand is people knowing who you are before you walk into the room. And I think what's really interesting is that people think that their personal brand is solely work focused. And I'm going to tell you right now, work is a means to an end, right? On your deathbed, no 90-year-old is going to tell you the days that I spent at work were the best days of my life. They're going to say some amazing things came out of that. But I think that we also need to be thinking about what that next chapter looks like. Like, how do we want to be remembered? How do we want to be seen? I think a lot of leaders think of themselves as empathetic when really they're sympathetic. What does that mean for the people that are working with you as well? So when we talk about personal branding, it is how you're showing up in the world. But I do think there is this layer of a personal storytelling that always falls into that brand. And the best brands are the ones that have some vulnerability and authenticity to it. The worst thing that you can ever do with your personal brand is really kind of build and create your personal brand according to what everybody thinks it should be. And then when people don't like it, changing it to be, again, what people want you to be. That is an exhausting venture. That is often the life of a content creator. And that's just a lot of work to constantly be changing your brand. So it is appeasing the masses, right? Not everyone's going to love your personal brand. I just think you need to be aware of that too. But either way, your brand needs to be authentic in how you show up in the world.
And is that when you think about executives and their brand and their public presence, and whether you've worked on personal branding or not, you have a personal brand because you're out there.
Yeah.
In thinking about the biggest mistakes executives make when they're trying to build that public presence, is it what you just mentioned? Is it this building a brand that's not authentic?
It's two things. I think I think it's a bunch of things. It's building an inauthentic brand. Yes. I think it's also allowing your corporate PR people to drive your personal brand according to what they believe it should be for the sake of shareholders. And then I also think it's building a brand that is solely based on the job that you're in. What if you go to another job and you just spent the last 3 years posting solely about the job that you're in? Your brand is too tied to that place. Now, as an entrepreneur and a founder, I think it's a little bit different because I do think you are building your brand while you're building your company. But we do get very caught up in, and I'm coming from this as a corporate PR person, we get caught up in what we believe our corporate PR people are telling us our brand should be versus what authentically it actually is. People by people. Be a person. Be real.
Yeah, it's weird. I find I do so much posting on stories from clients and lessons that I want to teach, and that's all great. And I want it to add value, and I hope it adds value. But when I get the most engagement is when I post something that's a lot more personal and may have nothing to do with my business. So I think that's interesting. And I don't see a lot of leaders posting the personal stuff. It is it just about when we think about public presence, is it, automatically my mind goes to social media.
Yeah.
But is it really kind of 95% social media, or is there a lot more to it?
I mean, there's a lot of leaders that aren't on social media at all. And it's just their reputation is preceding them and what their personal brand is. So, and maybe their personal brand is not being on social media. I mean, I have an old boss and a mentor who's not on social media at all. Zero. And his personal brand is amazing because he's so engaged one-on-one with the people that he has worked with in the past and the people that he continues to mentor. And I think that's the brand that everybody knows. And that's also part of the legacy he's going to leave behind. So it's not just how you show up on social media, because we all have to remember that most of social media is curated. It's not real.
Is there, what I'm going to ask you'll tell me it may fly in the face of being authentic. I don't think it has to, but it might. Is when an executive, when a leader thinks about their personal brand, do they need upfront to define what their personal brand is? I know for me, I'm one of those, like you mentioned, I'm a founder, entrepreneur. So my business and me are so tied together that my personal brand is very much about my business. And it's what I love to do. And I think on my deathbed, hopefully at about 140, I might look back and say the best times I've had is the work I did. But do we need to do something to define where our personal brand is, or do we just be authentic and our personal brand automatically comes out of that? How should we be thinking about it?
I mean, I think it's a little bit of both too, because it depends too, is your personal, or as a founder, is your company publicly traded? Do you know what I mean? That actually makes a big difference because you have shareholders that are, you have to keep in mind as you're creating or as you're amplifying your brand in whatever way possible. I still truly believe that everyone already has a brand and it needs to just be kind of like pumped up in the world if that's what you want to do. And if it's not what you want to do, if you don't want to be on social media and you don't want to be on LinkedIn and you don't want to be doing those things, it's also just, again, how people are talking about you. But the reality is that your brand is never really going to totally change. It will evolve as you evolve, I think, as a leader and as a mentor and as a teacher. And I think there's something that's really beautiful there. But I'm sure every single solitary person that you've had on here that's talked about personal branding and ones that you'll have in the future, it all comes down to authenticity. You have to be real. There's a word personal in there for a reason.
where is the line between, and maybe it's fuzzy, maybe there is no line, but is there a line between being kind of authentically bold and damaging your brand, right? There, I can remember, and I'll give you an
Oh,
example.
yes.
There
Sure.
was there, and there are two different ways I can think about it. One
Yeah.
is being authentic with your opinion. I could remember back when the Black Lives Matter became
Yes.
really big, when I forgot the name of the guy that died
Hmm.
with his neck under the foot of the policeman. And there were some leaders of organizations that came out and spoke for that
Yeah.
on one side or the other. And there were some that were like, why are you speaking out? You just lost, half of your clients and prospects you just lost because you just spoke to that half. So when it comes to how polarized our society is, even just talking about right versus left in politics,
Yeah.
if you authentically have some political beliefs, where's the line between how authentic you're going to be there and when you might say, whoa, wait a minute, I don't want to lose clients for that?
Yeah. As someone who's been in a lot of organizations and somebody who has dealt with a lot of crisis comms, there's not a great answer for that, to be honest. We are in a time where it almost feels worse to not say something, especially when you have a platform. But we are also running a business, and you need to keep in mind who your audience is. So as an independent founder and like comms exec, I want people to be using their platform in a positive way. And I want people to know the difference between something that feels political and something that feels like human rights. But I'm also very cognizant of, again, like what the market looks like and how we are polarizing clients when we do or do not say something. So we're always going to be in this place of kind of two camps of how PR people feel about this, whether you should say something or you shouldn't say something, whether you're going to get canceled or whether you're not. And I think it really comes down to how strongly you feel about something. And if you get to the point where you're just like, I just can't not say anything anymore. And it's been really interesting, especially on LinkedIn, of seeing how some people really are using that platform as a place to be talking about issues that matter to them and are just, you agree with me, great. If you don't, that's fine too. But this is how I personally feel about this. And then seeing the engagement of what that looks like. If you are a leader who wants to say something, but is also very nervous about saying something, I say always lean into the people. Lean into, I'm protecting my staff and I want to ensure that like the human rights of people feel safe and that they're being heard versus leaning into something that feels more political. But it is a very tricky and a very gray area that there is no single answer on. There just isn't.
And making it even trickier, and
Yeah.
I'm remembering a very specific client situation where what I'm getting at through this situation, I'll communicate, is how we should be thinking about this as a leadership team, right? Not just
Yeah.
about our own personal brands, but what about the personal brands as we cascade down through the organization? And the example I'll give you is very much back to the Black Lives Matter I mentioned before. And there was some backlash against the police, and it was some pro-police, anti-police. It was craziness. And I was working with an organization, and one of their kind of mid-level leaders, so they were leader in the organization, but not senior leadership team, but one of their mid-level leaders was
Yeah.
very outspoken in a way that happened to be on the opposite side to the majority of members of their company. And it was a fairly small company, but very outspoken on social media. And it was a very difficult thing for them to deal with as a company because people came to leadership and said, that's making me very uncomfortable
Oh,
that
yeah.
she's out there saying these things. So,
Yeah.
but on the other hand, you look at it and go, should we muzzle our people? And do we all have to agree? Do we all have to be on the same side of the political craziness? So how do you deal with managing the personal brands that are being built on the team and whether that fits or not with who you are as a company.
I mean, again, there's 17 different ways to answer this question. It's a good one.
Let me look at my watch. How much more time do we have?
Oh my God. It is very hard because I imagine everybody who's listening to this is dealing with something like this right now. I think the very first thing that you have to do is obviously have a code of conduct of how your team is working. So there's a few things that I always recommend to companies that they need to focus on first. The first one is always ensure that you've got a good HR person in place. And if you don't have, your lawyer should not be handling your talent. That is the number one no. You need an HR consultant. So I have lots. If you need recommendations, I'm happy to send them. The other thing that you're going to need is obviously then you're going to create a culture that is, you've got a code of conduct. You've got, and that includes a social media code of conduct. You also have a mission statement and a value statement, and everybody kind of knows the rules per se, right? Because I'm never one that wants to silence somebody if somebody feels really strongly about something. But if it is eventually at some point affecting the culture within the company and your clients, that is something you need to address. And there's ways to do that. The other thing is make sure that you always have a crisis communications person that you can call. Do not wait for the crisis to happen. Make sure that you just have a name of somebody in case something happens.
And is that typically, so a crisis communications person, is that typically someone within a PR firm? Is that where you find those folks? Or
yeah, it tends to be a PR person. There's some really great consultants that handle that as well. But once you're in the crisis, you are losing seconds very, 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 very quickly. And often you need to work much faster. And internal comms is the best way to kind of circumvent a lot of issues. Make sure that how you're talking as a leadership team to your employees is really important. And ensuring that everyone also always feels that there's a safe place to have communications and where to have conversations and where not to. So I think now that we have Slack or Google Chat or any of those things, everything feels just like a free-for-all and everybody can say whatever they want to say. Again, that goes back to a code of conduct of where things are actually okay to have discussions and where they're not. But we are all getting to this point where we don't have any kind of structure in place or any of this. And then it's happening and we're like, oh no, I don't know what to do now. So yeah, a consultant can help so much with just setting up kind of the guardrails, and everyone's going to get annoyed and everyone's going to feel like their speech was hindered. But in the end, it's actually going to just be a hard reset and everyone will understand why. It takes a while though. It's hard.
Yeah,
it's hard right now.
I'm gonna pull us out of the political crap that makes it hard and back to the idea of creating this authentic personal brand for the leader that hasn't thought much about it. They're posting on social media, some personal stuff, some professional stuff, but they haven't really thought about their brand. What are one or two things they ought to be thinking about or doing if they're hearing this and saying, wow, I need to focus on this more? What should they be going and doing?
So the number one thing is, just because you're a thought leader does not mean we need your thoughts on everything. You do not need to comment on everything. They create buckets. So I always tell people there's professional, there's personal. We need to find the fine line between all of them. I have the 3-bucket structure that I work with too. That is hard skill, soft skill, passion point, which always kind of helps you make sure that you're staying within those buckets and that space. They can be broad. I mean, it can be mine is comms and communications, spiritual health, and then I do touch on culture things, but I always bring them back to comms and something that's going on spiritually. But I really try not to veer too much. When I'm not going to be talking about engineering at any point, or I'm not going to be talking about big political things that are happening. That's just not part of my brand. If you are not somebody who wants to be a thought leader, which, to be honest, not every leader needs to be a thought leader. Your personal brand could live and die strictly of how you talk to your employees. That's it. It could just be that. But if you don't want to be a thought leader, just know that's okay. Making sure that your LinkedIn page is, as somebody said the other day, which I just love so much, her name's Courtney Harmon, it is the window to your storefront. What does that look like? It's a microsite of what's happening in your world. Just make sure that your LinkedIn looks professional. That is your personal brand. That's where it starts, is almost like the microsite to your store, right? You don't have to post. Just make sure it looks nice. Make sure it says exactly what you want it to people to read back. And if you don't want to post, comment. Commenting is the easiest way for people to drive traffic, but to also engage in a way that doesn't feel like very high stakes.
And maybe I should have started with this question, but
Yeah.
what's the value of doing that? So imagine we've got someone listening who is the CEO of a $30 million company. They're doing well. They're profitable. They don't know what their brand is. They just know they're a good leader. They're doing some great stuff. Is there an ROI but hey, if you created a clear personal brand, this is what it would mean for you. What's the value of thinking about this more and spending a little bit more time on?
People want to work with you and for you. That's the ROI. That's it. Honestly, the number one thing that I hear from people right now is that they want to work for leaders that care about people. I think right now, as there's so many holding companies that are going through restructures, there's so many tech companies who are laying people off. There's people who are going so far into AI, they're getting rid of everyone. And I think we're going to have a balancing at some point. But it all feels that there's a lack of any kind of care when it comes to human. And when it comes to tenure, and when it comes to loyalty, and when it comes to kind of just who we are showing up as a society. So I think if you're a leader who has empathy, who shares that they care about their people, who understands and talks about the fact that they understand the world that we're living in right now, and that it's all very heavy and a lot, and how you need to show up in your personal life and your professional life can be a challenge on a daily basis. That's what people want to work for. They want to work for somebody who kind of has some kind of understanding of what it feels like to be a regular person working a job, not necessarily running a business.
Yeah, I'm going to summarize what you just said and just add to it, because I think
Please.
it's so important. And you taught me something that I'm kind of processing as I'm talking. But what I hear out of that is, when you are building a personal brand that is authentically you, and your peers on the leadership team and CEO are doing the same thing, I think what it does is it makes you way more attractive to the people you want to attract, whether it
Exactly.
is, as you said, potential team members. I want to work there. And by the way, your authentic brand may repel the wrong people, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But I think it's team members, which you said, and I also think it's about clients, right? The right authentic brand is it's going to make you attractive to the right people and not so attractive to the wrong people. And that's a hell of an ROI, I think.
And I think when you have a leadership team, you always need to think about the fact that everyone on the team is going to bring in a different, kind of like a recipe, right? They're going to bring in a different spice or a different something that's going to make that team really gel together and make that team really attractive to different people. So if you've got the woman on the team that is the mom of three, who is the executive CEO who's running everything, you've got others that are looking towards this woman to be like, she can do it, so can I. Then you've also got the male leader who is, I'm like, what is the male leader doing? If he's not the CEO, we put the woman as the CEO. She's running the show right now. We've got the male leader who's the HR executive who is running all of the talent. And you've got young people looking up to see that they can do that too. I just think that we need to start thinking about what everyone's strengths are within the leadership team and how they're balancing out the weaknesses as well. And that you always are going to have another generation of workers who are looking up to them to be the succession plan of what that looks like too. I really worry that not AI, but also the last few years have really made a dent in mentoring and really focusing on what the next generation of leadership looks like. So I do love that your podcast is kind of talking about how teams can come together and how important that is, because I think there's another generation that needs to look at the fact that it's not just one person running everything, but really a well-formed team that is it's going to make or break a company.
Yeah, and I'm actually happy to see, and maybe I'm going to sound like an old traditional guy when I say this, but I'm happy to see that more and more companies are going back to the office. And it's not happening. And there are so many advantages to remote and hybrid. You can now recruit across the country for great people. I see the value there. But I think, and you made me think of this when you talked about mentoring. I had a client I worked with a number of years ago, and there was a gentleman who was on the senior leadership team who was about 78 years old.
Yeah.
Amazing guy. He'd been at the company for over 50 years. If you wanted to know anything about the history of the company, this is the guy you talk to. He was starting to slow down and work less and not work as hard. And I don't even remember what his position was,
Yeah.
but he was the guy that the meeting would be over and he'd just talk to you in the hallway, going back to his office, and just the wisdom from this guy was incredible. And he had so much value, even if his job function was nothing. If his value
I mean,
could
the
have been,
institutional knowledge of
and what happened
of
when
history of
COVID
everything.
hit,
Yeah. Yeah.
what happened when COVID hit and we all had to go remote and we learned what Zoom was, is when the meeting was over, the screen went black.
Yeah.
And the ability to talk to this guy literally at the water cooler or in the hallway or over lunch was gone. And he wound up retiring. And part of it was, and I think he was getting near that point anyway, but part of it was he realized he wasn't that useful to the company anymore. People weren't, he wasn't necessarily the kind of guy you were going to call with a specific question. There's certainly some that would, but it was the more informal mentoring. And I have a daughter who's 30 years old and she works remotely and she loves working remotely. And I think part of it is at her age, like most of her working life has been post-COVID.
Yeah.
And I think we miss some of that informal mentoring when we're just on a Zoom call, off a Zoom call. It's sad, but I think more companies are getting back to the physically being in person.
There's pros and cons to both for sure, because I agree with you. That's part of my process is I actually do behavioral analytics with an HR executive as a partner, because there are some people who do best remote because they have a low need to connect and their mental energy is so fast that they actually need to be away from people and in their space to get their work done, right? But I also then think having them in an office is a challenge to push them outside of their comfort zone and to be mentoring and to be communicating. And when we live in this world of, I think we're constantly digitally connected, but we are not physically connected. And the loneliness that's coming up between so many people, it's so important that we all need to kind of connect in different ways. So I actually think that hybrid is a great way to kind of find a good balance. There was just an article that came out in the Wall Street Journal about talking to strangers and how it's actually going to be like a wellness trend of 2026 and how it's good for your health. And I think about that all the time because even in corporate buildings, right, there's people in the lobby that you don't know. You're like, oh, I think you work on the third floor instead of the sixth floor. And people who weren't dating, I mean, just getting to know different people just on your commute or sitting at a bar after work, watching a hockey game. I mean, I just think that there's so much that happens with humans in life that we are missing by just being at home with however many people are in your home. So I think there's a lot of good that can come from that too.
Talk a little bit, Elizabeth, about what your company does. We've talked about, and I'm thinking as I'm talking, I'm like, I don't even know what I'm going to name this episode. We've talked about so many different cool things.
I know.
But what, so your company, the Good Advice Company, talk to me about what you do, what kinds of clients you work with, and how you help.
I mean, I was that person that quit my job on March 2nd of 2020, right before the world closed down, and then was like, oh, I guess I'm going to start consulting now. And it all happened via Zoom, and for me, the pandemic, there was actually a lovely thing that came out of it because I was really able to figure out what I wanted to do, what brought me joy, but also kind of like where I could be the most useful. So I do very high level strategic consulting for communications and marketing when it comes to pretty much everything. I'm that person that kind of that people bring me in for a third party kind of POV when they just have no idea where to go next. A lot of people will send me their ChatGPT PR plan and they're like, I wrote a PR plan. I'm like, oh, please do not do this. This is not going to work at all. No. So I do love to do that. I work mainly with creative agencies and marketing agencies because that was my background in corporate comms and entertainment. I was the director of comms globally for Apple's ad agency for a long time, and then another creative agency that represented the NFL and Target and Starbucks and all the fun consumer stuff. But then as I was building my own personal brand, because as a PR person, you're normally told to stay quiet and have everyone else speak while you are telling everybody else what to say. I was really learning kind of what works and what doesn't. And I told my story about burning out. I ended up in the emergency room with a migraine where I lost all my motor skills. And I wrote an op-ed about it, and it went viral on Business Insider in 2021. And then from there, I started helping other people tell their story. And I realized that when you can connect a human truth to your personal brand will flourish from that. So yeah, I started working with executives in all walks of life. So everything from a tech engineer founder to a creative designer to a finance person. I mean, literally it does not matter what industry you're in. Like I will figure out your personal brand and help you figure out how to amplify that into the world in a way that makes sense for you.
And of course, you give good advice because that's the name of your company. So
I'm a Virgo. I also we just naturally give good advice. I think it's just our lot in life. Yeah, I love it.
Where should people go if they want to find out more about you and how you might be able to help them?
Yeah, just thegoodadvicecompany.com. And then you can also find me on LinkedIn. It's just Elizabeth Rosenberg.
Beautiful. And you better have a good LinkedIn. You got to be eating your own dog
I think
food,
I do.
Right?
I think I do. I write a lot. It brings me a lot of joy. And I write about the things that people are always wanting to say, but don't say out loud. So I'm willing to take those risks, and they have rewarded me very kindly.
Beautiful. Well, I always say if you want a great company, you need a great leadership team. We talked about intuition. We talked about spirituality. We talked about branding. We talked about politics. I'm probably missing some things, but
Crisis,
all
yeah,
of
exactly.
that, I really appreciate Elizabeth helping us create a great leadership team together. All great stuff. Really appreciate the time we just spent together.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate it.